You know, my son died without a diagnosis on his death certificate. Pediatric palliative care is a neglected side of medicine in Australia. If a doctor said to you, you know, I can't save your child, what are you going to do? I still love my boy. You know, he's my inspiration. He'd be 8 if he was still here with us, but he's not. And I'm still going to talk about him. And we talk about him at home. You know, we want to leave a lasting imprint. You know, we're all human here wanting to go, what can I do here that's going to make a difference? I wish I could do this and my son was still here. Unfortunately, I'm in that situation where that hasn't come together. Adults, we have adult palliative care, but where do you go for kids? It's not just dying. And that's the biggest thing about palliative care you've got to understand. Kids come there to live. And as a father, yeah.
Welcome to Voices of Volunteering. My name is Matt Coughlin. I'm the head of sales for Varian. When asked to be a part of this podcast, to interview Ryan, who you'll hear from shortly, and learn more about Rio's legacy, I was honored to be a part of it, to know about this story. Please stay tuned to the end where there'll be more information on how you can support Rio's legacy. Ryan, welcome to the podcast. Welcome to Siemens Healthineers as well. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. It's a real honor to be here.
Are you nervous?
Yeah, as always, you get a little bit nervous, but you know I'm always proud to talk about what we do. So.
Yeah, I'm nervous as well. So let's be nervous together.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
Firstly, can you introduce yourself and Rio's legacy?
Yeah. So look, my name's Ryan Fowler. I'm a dad of 3 beautiful kids, a husband to my wife Karen Fowler, and we started Rio's Legacy. It's a charity to try and support kids who have a terminal illness and their families when the hospital says they can't help you out. So that's what we've started to do.
Tell us about the reason for Rio's Legacy and why it was established in the first place.
As I said earlier, I said I have 3 beautiful kids. But unfortunately, we lost our one in the middle. So that's Rio. I have a daughter. Her name's Remy. She's beautiful. But Rio got sick. It's a long story, but I suppose at the end of the day, we were living in Sydney. I was a boarding housemaster at the Scots College. My daughter came home from preschool with gastro, which is a normal thing. Rio got sick. We went to the hospital, and long story short, we never went home. So when we lost Rio, and there's a lot of things that happened in his story, we went to Bear Cottage, and it was amazing what they did for us. And after we lost our little boy, and he was a trooper, we needed to champion these places, and we can talk about what they are, but champion why it's a neglected side of medicine, and they need our help, these families, when they're going through the toughest thing and losing a child.
Tell me about Rio's name. I'm just interested in that name. It's a beautiful name.
It is a beautiful name. Rio, I'm a sportsman. My background is in tennis, but I've turned myself into a bit of a runner these. But I'm love sport. Always been around sport. So everyone thought that when we came up with his name, they thought it was me. They thought, this is Ryan for sure, because he was born in 2016. Which was the year of the Rio Olympics.
Oh, right. But
it actually wasn't the case. It was my wife who heard the name and thought, that's a beautiful name, short name, easy to spell. Don't get it wrong. And she also said, there's a famous footballer. And I said, Rio Ferdinand, he's a cool person and stuff like that. So the name generated from her, but it's Spanish for rivers. And it's Spanish for rivers and finding ways that, water can seep through rivers and go throughout land. And it's actually quite symbolic to Rio's condition. Remy, his older sister, that's French, and that's a part of, but that's an oarsman as well on the river. So it was kind of a beautiful match.
Yeah, it's a beautiful name, and I love the story behind it. Tell us a little bit more about Rio. Some of your fondest memories of Rio.
Oh, he's a beautiful little boy. Like I suppose any dad, any parent, you just think he's the world. You think he's got everything. He was cheeky. He loved trains. He loved Milky Ways, even though he was only 18 months. He loved doing all that, but he was tough. He was resilient. He taught me so much. You never thought your little kids teach you a lot, but he has. And they did an aggressive operation on his leg, and they were amazed that the week beforehand, how was he walking on that leg? Because his artery was completely blocked. He couldn't get blood down his leg. His body had started creating extra veins to try and get the blood past the blockages, but his whole artery down his leg was blocked. And they're like, well, how was he walking the weeks before? So what he went through and his status quo was just phenomenal. And I'm forever in awe of my little boy. But he always smiled, and that was the amazing thing. Like, I can't imagine that, but he always smiled. And, as a father, I loved him to bits, and he loved the Gruffalo. If any parents seen the Gruffalo, he loved that. He was all over the Gruffalo, and they got spooky, and he loved his tummy getting, you'd in his tummy, and he'd giggle his heart out and stuff like that. Yeah, no, he was a beautiful boy.
Yeah, beautiful. Tough kid.
Yeah, tough kid.
Look, I can't comprehend or to begin to understand what you and Karen have been through, but you've taken that grief and that experience and you've turned it into something really positive. Is there a particular moment that you and your wife, Karen, said, this is what we have to focus on and this is what we have to do in creating Rio's legacy?
That's a really good question. Yes and no. Yeah, Rio's journey was traumatic at hospital, and hospitals are important and hospitals are needed. But, we had a doctor say to us, we can't save your son. And when the doctor says that, it's like, well, what do you do? And we went to Bear Cottage, which is, there's only 3 of these in Australia. And then after that, it was a bit of I suppose there was a motivation in me to try and help out. And I was probably dealing with my grief. Rather than channeled by, drinking and things like that, I was like, well, I'm going to get focused on something here and try and do something positive. But there was a moment where my wife did go away to a conference, and she came back, and it was really important that she was part of this charity with me. I know I was the one who was keen to do something, but that was probably a moment where she had a realization that, Rio is our boy, and he'll always be our boy, and I'll always talk about him, but she had this visualization of trying to, seeing other kids and what we can do and go from that point of view. So that was sort of the moment where Karen said, okay, I'll come on board with you, because I needed her for us to do this together. And yeah, it wouldn't be the same without Rio's mum.
Yeah. You mentioned Bears Cottage. What's Bears Cottage?
So Bears Cottage is, it's the only hospice in New South Wales. And what it is, it's a place that families go to when they have a child that has a terminal illness or a complex need. And it's a place they go to for respite, but also end-of-life care. Okay. So this is when, as I said, so children who are in this situation, they have a terminal illness. They have a life-limiting condition, which I'd never heard of. The doctor said, your son has life-limiting condition. And at that stage, I was like, what does that mean? What is that? So when the hospital says, we can't help you, we don't know what to do, and the only option is to go home, sometimes that's too hard. Like for Rio's case, we couldn't go home. We weren't prepared for those things and things like that. So this is where Bear Cottage support, and they give free services that they offer, and they allow you to be a family. So as well as looking after your child, your whole family can come along and be there with them, and and you can share those moments. But they can also take some respite where they support the child, so that the mum and dad, or they can have a night out or something like that, where they just really support and they embrace the family. So this is what Bear Cottage does, and that's what they did with us when we went there.
Yeah, that's great. Sounds like a beautiful place, an important place. Could you share a bit about the journey of Rio's legacy, the ups and downs, and the challenges in establishing it?
Yeah, there's a lot of journeys when you do this. There's a lot of people, I think, who go through challenging times, whether it's losing someone or just another challenging. They want to do something positive. So you probably see a lot of dads or mums out there doing big challenges in honor of people. And I commend that. That's amazing. But we really wanted to set up something and really move forward. So we quickly just established us as a charity. But the challenges straight away came with, people were trying to say, if you start a charity, Ryan, you've got that for life. Well, I had my son Rio. It wasn't like I wanted him just for 2 weeks and then that was it. He was my son. I want him for life. So if I can start a charity, and it's not easy, but try and help out other families, I'm going to do that, and honouring him, but also honouring other families. Other challenges would be people didn't know how to talk to us, and that was always a tough one. We had a situation where someone had to Google how to talk. Yeah, and it's like so those moments were tough going through that, but then also trying to start a charity and people going, look, isn't this enough? Like you've gone through the grief, you have to keep going through this, and those things. I understand why those questions get asked, but we decided, to really push forward and go, hey, look, we believe these kids are fearfully, wonderfully made. We believe these kids deserve an opportunity and to be championed. And there's a neglect. So those were challenges. And the doctor said to us, pediatric palliative care is a neglected side of medicine in Australia. And that's a pretty big statement when you're in that category.
Yep.
My son was in that category, and he said it's neglected side of medicine. And I'm like, well, who else have they said that to?
Mm-hmm.
So they're challenges that we try to overcome. But then I was like, well, I'm not asking anyone to do it. We will do it. And I'd set myself out on a few challenges to try and raise awareness.
What have been some of the challenges or the hurdles that you've had to overcome in establishing Rio's legacy?
I always say this, I'm not a Glenn McGrath, whereas I can just rock up to a company and go, hey, how you going? And then they go, yep, here we go. So it's been a fight trying to
Mm-hmm.
continually, a small little charity like us, that's been a challenge. And there still is a challenge as you go through that, especially when you're working in an area, but you've also got, I'm talking about my son every day. That's not easy, trying to go through that and what he's been through and reliving that. But I'm proud to say that now we're getting somewhere. And, along the time we've had governments and places who have said, no, we're here with you. But it's just trying to find those things. I didn't sign up to do this as a career, but I've chosen to do it now because what we do. And those challenges have been real, but I think they've been needed.
You mentioned that people had a difficult time speaking to you. Does that mean that they would just avoid you as well, or avoid bringing it up and talk about the weather instead?
Yeah, sometimes. Yeah, sometimes they're like, yeah, you're right. They want to avoid speaking to you, didn't know how to bring it up.
Mm-hmm.
Try and, change the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it got easier where you'd probably sit there and go, well, should I say I have 3 children or only 2?
Right.
And it's like, no. I've always, and my mother-in-law, the whole family have always said, no, we have 3 kids. And, and they always say, look, I'm sorry to hear that, but I still love my boy.
Mm-hmm.
He's my inspiration. He'd be 8 if he was still here with us, but he's not. And I'm still going to talk about him. And we talk about him at home. I've got another little boy, Levi, who wasn't around when Rio was with, but he knows about Rio. He knows about it. And it's also for my daughter. She was 4 years old when she went through that. And I think it's important that we acknowledge for her, the time that she went through that, because that is her brother as well. So, yeah, people do avoid it, but, you got to try and just keep persevering.
And how's Remy doing?
Oh, you're going to get me cry over my daughter. She was 4 years old when we were in hospital, and we tried to have, when either Karen or I would be at hospital because Rio needed, and she would be at home with her grandparents.
Mm-hmm.
And we thought we're doing okay. And there's sometimes we both had to be at hospital. But when we got to Bear Cottage, we were able to just be together. So Remy spent time with Rio, and we slept in the same room, in the same place and all that. And she had a fear factor of us going to the hospital, whereas she never had that at Bear Cottage.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, she's an amazing girl. She's come through so well. She's in year 6 now. She got to know other children, other families at Bear Cottage. And I'm so proud of her. And I get very teary when I think of my girl and what she's been through.
Tell us about the role that community has played for you in establishing Rio's legacy.
Yeah, no, community's been amazing. I was a boarding housemaster and director of tennis at the Scots College, which is a boys' boarding school in Sydney, in Bellevue Hill. The way those boys embraced us, Dr. Lambert was the headmaster there, the way the school embraced us. Yeah, there were moments, there were some tricky times, but the way the school that embraced us and got around us, it was truly remarkable to see those boys. They'd never been through something like that. My family living in a boarding house, they saw my kids grow. Those boys mean the world to us. And to have them empower what we were doing, I did a big run from Melbourne to Sydney, and I finished at the Scots College, and there was 2,000 boys. So, when you start from a community, I start from there because that's where it all generated. And we had boys going on to do, they're professional athletes, but they want to be Rio Legacy ambassadors. Mm-hmm. And they're now men. They don't have to be part of this, but they want to be part of what we're doing. And I'm so forever grateful to those boys, to the school, to the way they got around us, but then to our family and friends and everyone. And then from there, you sort of just continue to grow. Community is important. Mm-hmm. And the way Bear Cottage embraced us, we wouldn't be here without the community.
And I know you're living in Melbourne now, but I imagine Scots College still plays a big part in all of this.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, I mean, my boy, he lived his whole life at Scots. And I remember, so after Rio had passed, and I took a lot of the Scots boys leaders at that time over to Bear Cottage to visit Bear Cottage. one of the boys who I'd seen at our boarding house all the way from year 7 up to year 12. He wrote us all a couple of letters, and he wrote a letter individually to my wife, to my daughter, and said, "Remy, I know you lost your brother, but we'll always be here. We'll always be your brother. You'll always be our sister."
Yeah,
but he wrote me a letter and said, "Mr. Fowler, I see you as a dad, and what you've been through." And yeah, those things are pretty powerful, and they've still supported us all the way, and they've run on journeys with me. So I can't thank the boys enough.
What's been the most profound thing for you on this journey?
There's a few things. I set out, when we set out as a charity, like, what do you do? So I think one of the most profound things is putting yourself out there, but seeing how the people will embrace you. Mm-hmm. I'm not a runner, but I've turned myself into running. And I decided that in 2018, I'm going to run from Melbourne to Sydney. I know I'm not an Ed Brockerman, but I've decided, how else are we going to do this? I'm not asking you to do it, but I'm going to put myself out there. The way people embraced that was quite overwhelming. The way people got around that was quite simply amazing. Mm-hmm. I never lose hope in humanity, because there's so many great people out there trying to do things, and that's one profound thing that has always stuck with me. And
so that was the first thing that you did, the run from Sydney or Melbourne to Sydney?
Well, the ultimate thing is trying to build a hospice, because it's how do we talk about this? Because it's not a great conversation. Like, you sick kids, but sick kids who aren't going to live. Like, that's not really a cup of coffee kind of conversation that you have all the time. So I was like, okay, these kids can't do what I do. So you're right. I started training, and we got some support. So it took me 26 days, and I ran from very special kids here in Melbourne. It's the only hospice here in Melbourne. So I ran from there, and I ran through regional Victoria, New South Wales, and finished at the Scots College. So I averaged a marathon a day. And that was my first. I've done a few more now, but that was my first challenge, to try and bring awareness. Mm-hmm. And we got some good ambassadors around us. We had Channel 7 supporters. So that's great. Yeah, that was the first thing to try and, hey, let's start talking about this.
During that experience and following that, did you have a lot of parents come up to you and say, hey, I've gone through this as well, and feel like they had somebody that they could also speak to?
We've had some amazing parents we met at Bear Cottage, but also amazing parents that we've along the way. Mm-hmm. I'm in awe of them, those people. Because, with Rio, we had I call it a tsunami. So we went to hospital in November, and by January, we'd lost him. So we had a very unsure of what's going on. But there's so many families out there, and we met one amazing family who'd been to Bear Cottage. They'd been using the services for 10 years, needing that support. And I think there's a study out there that says, a lot of 80% of marriages sometimes break down after this. And I'm proud that my wife and I feel we got stronger, but those families who have used those services for years, that's what we're out there doing. And for them to go, hey, you deserve to be listened to, and you deserve to be champions. So
how did you guys do it? You've been married for 13, 14 years. Said you're stronger than ever. How did you two manage this?
Yeah, we my wife is amazing. She's a beautiful mother. She's a beautiful carer. She brings out the best in me. I think she brings out the best in the kids. As much as I like to say, mums and dad, mums are mums. I'm a mummy's boy. Yeah, we really came together, and it was amazing how we came together. Mm-hmm. And there was a moment there where, especially when I thought Rio was rejected, I was almost like, maybe I should just go home, because I was really struggling. And my wife said, no, we need you here. You're here. And I'm thankful I did, because we, as I said, it wasn't Rio. I was just going through a tough time. And there I was thinking about myself. And I'm just like, fire, Ryan, come on. Mm-hmm. Okay, this is on us. I don't want it to be on us, but we need to do something about it. And that's where our tagline of fearfully and wonderfully made. My son is fearfully and wonderfully made. All these kids are. It doesn't matter how short or long their lives are. They are beautiful kids, and they deserve whatever it is, whether they're here for a day, 10 days, or 10 years. And that really resonated with Karen and I think that kept us together.
What's it mean for you and for Rio's legacy to have organizations support a charity?
Massive. And the reason I say that is you want to, I want to say movements, but you want to do things, you want to change things. We want to leave a lasting imprint. We're all human here wanting to go, what can I leave? What can I do here that's going to make a difference? I know we go to work 9 to 5 and we do those things, but what can I really do to make a difference? I wish I could do this and my son was still here. Unfortunately, I'm in that situation where that hasn't come together. But to make that change and really get involved, that's where companies can really, I suppose, change the conversation. And that's where big companies who can come in and go, hey, this is a needed conversation. There's families out there who need support. There's people like us, but families who, as I said, need that support, need that care when they're going through the toughest thing. If a doctor said to you, I can't save your child, what are you going to do? And that's where companies can really champion, with their, not just their people, but everything, that gets behind it. I think it's paramount. And people will get involved with a family. We've lost a son, so they're going to, for a while, they're going to rally around that. And that's our story. But people aren't going to support us or want to keep supporting us 10 years, 20 years down the track because, there's other kids, there's other families, the things that go on, there's other tragedies, and, we can't just keep doing that. You've got to not get over it, but you've got to move on. But this is where companies can come in, because when you look at here in Australia, we only have 3 hospices. So we only have 3 facilities in our country that when a doctor in a hospital says, we can't help you out, and hospitals are needed, and I don't want to, hospitals are amazing. Mm-hmm. But when they say we can't help you out, and if you can go home, but even if home isn't an option or you need just some support, where else do you go for kids? Adults, we have adult palliative care, mm-hmm. but where do you go for kids? We only have 3 in this country, and they're all on the east side. So there's Hummingbird House in Brisbane, there's Bear Cottage in Sydney, and there's Very Special Kids. So I've heard of families, and I know of families that have had to travel from South Australia, from Perth, just to get respite so they can get a bit of support. But they shouldn't have to travel away from their families. So we only have 3. When you compare that to in the UK, and there's over 50, you sit there going, well, how as a country do we have that? And I believe that's the biggest part where companies can really go, okay, we can help make a difference here, because that's not just a family, that's a national problem. I think looking at the per capita, we should have at least 16, going around our country. We have 3 to offer that support.
And how many beds? If there's only 3, how many beds?
So each place would have at least 8 or 9 beds. You can probably get up to 10, but 8 beds. So you're talking 24 beds. And you don't want a big hospital, and this is where you get, but you're talking 24 beds available for either end of life or respite that is needed. Mm-hmm. Where families can go, hey, I need that support. I couldn't imagine living in WA or living in Northern Territory or even outback New South Wales, and the doctor says that, and I'm like, well, what are we going to do? Mm-hmm. I mean, my son, the doctor, he was on 6 antihypertensives, and they still couldn't bring his blood pressure below 170. The doctor's like, I'm like, how can I do that at home? Yeah. My son died without a diagnosis on his death certificate. So he wasn't diagnosed with cancer. So we still are unknown. How do you cope with that? Imagine doing that and there's no other support. Mm-hmm. So I don't mean to elaborate or get emotional around that, but that's where I think companies can really, hey, if you can support, share the story, get behind it, funds, those things are important, but that's a real critical gap in our health here in Australia.
It's difficult to talk about, and as a father of 2, I can't even begin to imagine what you've been through. How do you recommend talking to other parents that have gone through this?
Yeah, it's not an easy thing to talk to, and the best thing about it is just people try to say they understand what you and people will relate to what you've gone through. But when it's not until you talk to someone else and you look in their eyes and you're like, they know exactly what you've gone through, the goods, the bads. They know exactly. That's quite powerful. These families were amazing, and I went to Bear Cottage probably angry. Mm-hmm. I was against going to Bear Cottage because when the doctor said we can't help you out and we were done, and you hear palliative care, you're like, are you giving up? And as a father, my role is to try and protect my son. Mm-hmm. I want to protect him. I want to look after him. And I thought the doctors and everyone was giving up on him. And I remember driving to Bear Cottage to check it out and we'd never heard of it. And I was like, this is it, we're giving up on my son. I've actually watched my mum go through palliative care, so I lost my mum beforehand. And that word palliative care is quite, unfortunately, has a negative connotation around it. But it's not until I got to Bear Cottage, I'm now completely 180, turned the other way. Like he was still struggling at Bear Cottage and he still had a tricky journey. But watching the other families and talking to them and understanding that you're not the only one. Like the doctor said that we'd never seen this, what is going on in Rio. But then you hear so many other families that have had the same story. And you're like, how is this happening? How, someone said to me, how in today's day and age can that still happen? And I'm like, well, medicine is great, but it doesn't know everything. I'm a type 1 diabetic. So medicine's helping me out. But I had the best doctors going, yeah, we got nothing. So talking to another family, talking to another dad, and especially as a dad, my role is to protect my kids. And I don't talk about it often, but there was a couple of days in Bear Cottage where I don't know whether Rio it looked like he might have had a stroke. His blood, he might have had something, one side of his face had dropped a bit. And he was struggling to get the blood around his body. Effectively, he starved to death because he couldn't get the blood to his stomach. So he couldn't eat. And the doctors are like, yeah, no, he's going to pass away tonight. And he championed on for another 8 days. Leading up to that, there was a day where he just didn't want to, like I would go near him and he would cry. And he'd never done that before. And as a father, that was really tough to take because I just wanted to protect my boy. I wanted to be around him. And I felt like he was scared of me. And I had a doctor at Bear Cottage, and he was a father, and said, he's not scared of you. He's just, he wants to present the best for you. And that's what most boys want to do. They want to show their dad that I've got this, I'm strong, and you are that protector. And at the time, I didn't really understand it, but it really sort of helped a bit because, here I am wanting to protect my boy, and they said, look, it's not him, it's just what's happened. It felt like it went forever, but then I remember my wife coming in and Rio was on me, and he curled up like he normally does. But having that doctor and having that dad say, hey, I understand what you're going through. You can't take that away.
You mentioned that you were angry and rightfully so driving to Bear Cottage. At what point did that switch for you? At what point did it go from anger to, I don't know if acceptance is the right word, but appreciation, or I'm not sure what the right word is to use.
Palliative care, like you think of it, and I suppose the people listening, anytime you hear the word palliative care, your default mind is, that's it, we're done. And like I said, I remember when the doctor told us for my mum, she's in palliative care now. And I'm like, okay. So when that happened with my son, straight away I was like, that's it, And it was probably a couple of days in Bear Cottage when not just the doctors and the nurses, and they don't wear doctors, they just wear normal clothes. So it looks like a home. It is a home away from home. It looks like a bedroom. You don't see the medical equipment. It's all put away. They have a dog that walks around and helps out. They have social workers. They have art therapy. They have everything there. But when they embraced us as a family, when a volunteer, we came in on a harrowing ambulance trip and we arrived, and the first thing that the volunteer said to my wife was, how would you like your cup of tea? You don't get that at the hospital. And I understand why, because the hospital is they're trying to save life. And I get that, but that was massive. When the social worker came up to me and said, what's the best way to go to Remy? Because my daughter was really frightened. I remember being at home and we closed the bedroom door and she was just standing on the other side and the door just closed and she started screaming, and it was just that fear factor because mum and dad aren't here, and she was so used to that in the hospital. But when the social worker said, what's the best way to approach Remy? That's amazing. Like, is she one of those ones, do I go up to her? And I said, if you just sit around and start colouring. And Remy came over, and Remy's got nothing but beautiful. So that's when I understood that, palliative care is more than just dying. It's not just dying. Kids come there to live. And Narelle Martin, who's the manager there, said they come here to live, not to die. And that really turned my anger or we're giving up to, okay, what they did for my family, the way they embraced my daughter, my son, the way they embraced us as a family. It's not just dying. And that's the biggest thing about palliative care you've got to understand. And as a father, yeah, like I said, you're not giving up, but you're just sitting there going, okay, our course is a bit different now, and I need to lead and support my family in a different way.
You know, we're here to celebrate Rio and learn more about Rio's legacy and how we can support. But how do you keep Rio's memory and life alive with your kids and within your family?
We read the Gruffalo.
Yep, love the Gruffalo.
We love the Gruffalo. We love trains.
Yeah.
Milky Ways around. I'm a type 1 diabetic, so I shouldn't have Milky Way. Yeah, Milky Ways are around and stuff like that. Look, it's a really good question, because when you do something like this, you put your whole family out there, you know, and my wife and I, but my daughter and and Levi. Levi, you know, he wasn't around when this all happened. But we make sure that Remy's across it all. We make sure that she's okay. But we make sure that we talk about us as a family. And it's not about trying to champion Rio's name. Rio is our legacy and Rio is what we've done, but it's trying to help out other families. And my daughter, Bear Cottage taught her so much. At home, we're just a family. Rio's just one of we talk about him, we bring him up. It's beautiful when Remy talks about Rio to Levi to try and, you know, and we talk about this invisible connection, how there's an invisible string. And that's a book that families get that talks about the invisible string that you have if anyone passes away. And we talk about that invisible string that Rio has. So we just talk as a family and make sure that he's alive. Even though physically he's not with us, he's there with us, and we talk as a family. My daughter is amazing in the understanding that it's going to be out there, but she's got a heart of gold. She wants to help other kids. You know, she got to meet another girl there and other kids who are going through this and become pen pals to really support. And a great story of Remy that talks about the influence of Rio and that on her is that after Rio had passed, she went back to school, and there was this beautiful little boy who had a few learning difficulties, and they were just sitting around colouring in as they do in class. And this was Remy's first couple of weeks back at school, and he just all of a sudden came over and started just scribbling. So most kids that age would upset, you know, what's going on here? And the teacher came to us, and I said, this is a proud moment for me. She said, your daughter just she just walked over, got a brand new sheet of paper, brand new colouring in pencils, and just sat down and just kept drawing again and started all over again. I was so proud of my little girl for doing that. She understanding what this boy was going through, and she learned that through Rio, and she's understood that through Rio. So he's still part of our family, and he always will be.
I understand there's some important news that's just been announced. It's sort of hot off the press, right? Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, hot off the press. So a new hospice will be opening. That's going to be in Western Sydney. For those who live in Sydney, there's a lot of people there. I think not at the moment, but I think in the next couple of years, west of Parramatta, there's going to be 3 million people. So Sydney is one of those places where extra support. Bear Cottage is amazing. So it's just been announced with the government. And we had Mounties Group, which is amazing, a big club in Western Sydney, who come on board. So Mounties have put in 13 million,
That's fantastic.
which is the biggest donation ever received. The government's now going to back it with 20 million, so it'll be, yeah. And we're going to build Mounties Care Cottage, which has been built through Rio's legacy. But it's just been announced by the Health Minister and Premier Minns' government. So it's still sinking in that we have achieved that. And we're doing things, and I can't thank the government, Sydney Children's Hospital Foundation, Sydney Children's Hospital Network, Mounties, you know, and Giants. GWS Giants came on board. And it was really through the GWS Giants that we started this conversation. I got to know Cal Ward, who's an awesome AFL player, and his wife, who heard our story through one of your amazing people around here. And then from there, yeah, they said, okay, what can we do? And that's where that just shows you the question that you answered before, we were talking about before, that just shows you when a club, or it's not a club, a company says, hey, we're going to stand behind this little guy, my Rio and his little legacy.
Big legacy.
And look, and look what's come of it.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm just sitting there going, well, that's here. You know, so it's still sinking in. But yeah, there's going to be a hospice in Western Sydney that's going to service those families out there, which they desperately need.
Yeah. Well, it's amazing news. Congratulations. It's seems like many hours and nights and months and years of hard work. So these things don't just happen, right? You put in the effort. So it's phenomenal. Which brings me to, how can we help? What can Siemens Healthineers do to support you, to support Rio's legacy? Where can we go to support you with both money and time?
Yeah. So look, as I said, just being able to tell the story here and sort of give you a bit of a glimpse of what's going on, that's amazing. I can't thank Siemens Health and everyone, you know, involved in terms of making this happen. You can find us on the website. We have our charity page, so rioslegacy.org.au. I suppose the biggest way is when the hospice gets open in Western Sydney, yeah, we'll be looking for volunteers and things like that. But the biggest thing now is raising awareness, but also still raising funds and doing things. As I said, South Australia doesn't have one. Northern Territory don't have one. Tasmania don't have one. So I think the fight is still going. So we have a lot of challenges in place. So you can go to our website, you can donate if able to, or support that. Please get in touch with us, volunteers, because we do challenges and sometimes we need people to help out on those challenges and things like that. One of the other things we're doing is the City to Surf. So if you're keen to fundraise or get around it, we're doing that in collaboration with the Giants, GWS Giants. Get around it. We want to see a big army running into Bondi. But really start talking about it is another one. And if there's any contacts that, you know, you can say, hey, this is how we can get around and support, I think that's valuable, because it's a conversation that, like I said, not a lot of people want to talk about, but it's a conversation that deserves to be spoken, and, you know, get in there. So there are ways that you guys can help.
Thanks for tuning into today's episode. We hope the conversation offered some insight, connection, or even just a moment of reflection. If anything we discussed today brought up difficult feelings, remember, support is always available. Siemens Healthineers offers a 24/7 employee assistance program through Healthineers Life, powered by TELUS Health. Confidential, professional support whenever you need it. Thanks again to Ryan. Thank you for listening, and I hope you got something out of it. For more information, there are going to be links available below. Please click through both to Rio's Legacy and to the Assistance Support Program. Thank you.